Wendy Mesley. I was at the CBC for 1,000 years, and I now live in Picton, and I'm here with David Frum, who lives part-time in Wellington and part-time in Washington, where he's a staff writer for the Atlantic, and he's written a bunch of books too. We were hoping that this would be a setup for The Apprentice, and we hope that you still get to see it. I'm sure we're going to hear the stories of Trump forever.
Yeah.
You've written a few books.
Yes. I wrote a book about Donald Trump in the spring of, or published it in the spring of 2020. It had the unfortunate release date of March 2020. I think there's a joke about tell a sad business story in just a few words, and opening March 2020 would be one of them. But the book found an audience, but it's been overtaken by events. Since then, there has been the election of 2020, Trump's attempted overthrow of that election, first by fraud and then by violence in January of 2021. The legal consequences, his reclaiming of the Republican nomination for 2024, and now, of course, we are imminently waiting the result of the presidential election of 2024, and maybe the final resolution of the legal cases against him after the election.
So in the midst of all of this is The Apprentice. We were supposed to be able to see it, but it's been pulled. So what on earth is going on?
So as I understand it, here's what has happened. The Apprentice is a fictionalized version of the life of Donald Trump, based on facts, but with actors. It's not a documentary, it is a drama. The drama retells many of the most lurid allegations against Donald Trump in his lifetime, including an allegation that during his first marriage to his wife, now deceased, Ivana, that as the marriage was breaking apart, he sexually assaulted, raped her. And we know this story because Ivana included this allegation in her divorce claims against Donald Trump.
But then recanted it.
But then when the case was ultimately settled, and the settlement was sealed, she recanted the allegations. So if you include this in a film, you have a lot of libel risk. And the filmmakers said, we will defy the libel risk. But the film distributors said, not so much us. They got a cease and desist order from Trump's lawyers, and the distributors, and it's the same distributors worldwide, have gotten nervous. They may change their mind. They showed the movie in Cannes. It may yet reappear, but I think they're waiting for some kind of adjudication of this cease and desist order.
Does it mean that Hollywood is intimidated by Donald Trump, that he can just throw the law around?
Well, Hollywood is a place that is very easy to intimidate. Films are risky businesses, and they don't like extra risk, and distributors are not famous for their courage. And Donald Trump is a notoriously vicious and reckless litigant. He uses his litigation often against people who provide goods and services to him, and then he doesn't pay the bill, and then he'll say, sue me. And he just hopes that the cost of going to law and the unpleasantness is so great that people who don't do it all the time, the way he does, will say, okay, give me 50 cents on the dollar for the window dressings I sold your club, or for the cans of pineapple juice. So that's what he's doing here. As with E. Jean Carroll, the New York writer who alleged that he sexually assaulted her in New York in the 1990s. Trump repeated and repeated and repeated the defamation of her, said she's a liar, she's crazy, it's not true. He lost and lost again, and then he kept not paying, and she had to keep going back to court. So he uses law as a shield, and he uses it as a sword. He will come after people who report things about him that are surely true.
So he's using the law. The New York Times said that this is chilling. Is it chilling?
It means that things about Donald Trump that are highly relevant take a long time to come to light. For example, the New York Times in 2018 published a story of systematic Trump tax fraud by the Trump family. Not only Donald Trump, but Fred Trump, his father, a very successful businessman, which Donald Trump was not, to evade taxes through using false invoices. In this story, they use the word fraud, which is a libel magnet, and they sort of defied Trump to sue them because their story was so well reported. They had the invoices, they had the documents. Now, none of this exposed Trump to being prosecuted for the frauds because they were outside the statute of limitations. These frauds dated back to the 60s and 70s. So you have only so many years for the government to bring a case against you for cheating on your taxes. But the Times said he cheated on his taxes. We're calling it fraud. We're calling it a pattern of fraud, and we defy Trump to sue us. But the Times has a very sophisticated legal team. They've got the capacity to put a lot of reporters on a story for a long time. That's not true of everybody. And many stories are less than 100% certain. They can be strongly certain, but if you don't have the resources or you can't pay the costs of getting justice, then a deep-pocketed, vexatious litigant can silence you.
But who gets to decide what is true? I mean, we're seeing that in all kinds of movies adapted these days. Who gets to decide?
Well, from the most literal answer to your question is it's the lawyers of the film distribution company who are saying to the film distribution company, you may win this case. If you go ahead and release this movie, you may win. Probably you'll win. The Supreme Court will say, yeah, you have fair comment. But it will take a lot of years and cost a lot of dollars. Is that something you'd like to do with your one and only life and your limited number of dollars? And the film distributor will say, how certain are we to win? And the lawyers will say, pretty certain, but not 100%, obviously.
And it'll cost you a fortune.
And it'll cost you a fortune. And those are the people who decide. That's how it's done. To quote another movie, Dirty Harry, do you feel lucky? And the distributor may say, I don't feel that lucky. George W. Bush, for whom I worked as a speechwriter, there were a couple of very harsh movies made about him. The movie Vice by Adam McKay, there's an Oliver Stone movie a decade earlier, and they contain very harsh allegations. Some of them, in my opinion, quite crazy. But usually politicians think, we take the rough with the smooth. If George W. Bush were head of a company, he might take legal action against the things that were said in those movies and others. But because he's a politician, politicians are usually, and this is where Donald Trump is different, usually say, you know what, people say a lot of nice things about me that I don't deserve, so maybe I'll put up with some harsh things about me that I don't deserve. So unless he's
Except he's Donald Trump.
Except he's Donald Trump. And so, you know, there's a scene in the Oliver Stone movie about George W. Bush in which Dick Cheney outlines this vision of world conquest. It's crazy. I mean, it's not what happened. It's not how Cheney would talk. It's not true to anything. But shrug, let him talk is the usual political answer. That's where Donald Trump is different.
Do people care more about movies than they care about Putin or NATO or any of the things that he has said? Like, does it matter?
So back in the 19th century, there was a New York political boss called William Marcy Tweed, Boss Tweed, and he was as corrupt as could be. And there was article after article and after article about him in the newspapers. There was also a cartoonist named Thomas Nast who drew very powerful cartoons about Tweed's corruption. And Tweed kept trying to bribe Nast to stop doing it because he said, my voters can't read, but they can see the pictures.
So does an adaptation mean more than a policy about something?
Well, think of how many things we think we know about politicians that are actually based on Saturday Night Live sketches.
Yeah.
Like Sarah Palin never said, I can see Russia from my house. She didn't say that. That was a comic sketch. She said something that prompted the joke, but she didn't say that. But people think she said it. George Bush never used the word strategery until after Saturday Night Live did a sketch in which Gore and Bush running against each other were asked the secret of their campaigns, and the Bush character says strategery. and it was funny because Bush had a way of speaking where he often dropped an extra syllable. He had a tick, a stumble. That he would drop extra syllables into words and turn strategy into strategery. And then the Bush campaign itself, on the office, there would be doors where people put up signs that say Office of Strategery. But he didn't say it, that was a sketch, but we all now more or less think he did. So these things can be very powerful.
Do you think that the fact that Trump is now being portrayed as a loser could have an impact? I mean, are we that simple?
The human mind is such an amazing range of things. At our best, we are reasoning creatures. At our best, we are creatures committed to fairness and justice. But we also have like these lizard parts of our brain, and we respond to stereotypes and images. We respond to certain kinds of mockery. So all of these things work at the same time, and a lot of the reality of how politics is we're talking both to people's highest ideals and their lowest hatreds. We're talking to their most responsible decision making, but also their most stereotypical thinking. So people get ideas about these remote politicians, and a lot of what the politicians are doing that's important is also technical and hard to understand and hard to evaluate. They have various kinds of proposals. What are you supposed to think about that? But you get a sense of, maybe a false sense, but you think you know them as people. And that's all part of how we, as citizens, as voters, as consumers of media, as people in a world where the United States looms so large, how we react to things that we think we see.
So I'm wondering, you mentioned media. Where is media? Like, where is everybody? Is it this movie that he has decided that he's going to attack? Is it the media? Is it the headlines? Who determines the truth, if there is such a thing? Well,
I think the best answer to the question, where is everybody, is TikTok. That's where everybody is. We have these age-segmented forms of media. You'll often hear people say, the media do thus and so. And you'll say, when you say the media do thus and so, what do you mean? Well, I mean the media that I personally consume. I mean the last of the prestige print newspapers. I mean the faded 3 old networks. A lot of people, especially older people, when we say the media, we mean the media that were important in 1972. And the idea that maybe the most important media company on earth is TikTok is a hard idea to process if you're not a regular TikTok user. We are all offered in the modern world system of information and entertainment a very double-edged bargain. It is possible to be better informed today than ever before in human history, to know more deeply about more subjects more rapidly than any human beings ever before, including the CIA and MI6 at the zenith of their power. But, and here's the catch, you have to work at it, because all of that true information, powerful information, universal and rapid information is floating in a sea of sludge, of lies, of disinformation, of stereotypes and deceptions calculated to work on the irrational parts of your brain. You're given clips and glimpses and jokes and memes and things designed to appeal to exactly the prejudices that the algorithm knows you to have. And all of us, in a way, are given this other responsibility, which is because we not only receive media, but we share it. We're not just consumers, but we're also distributors of information. And so all of us have to make moral choices in our distribution life. What will I share? What will I give my validation to when I share it with my friends and neighbors?
Which brings us all back to The Apprentice and adaptations of political events. Why is this so important? I mean, I'm sure Trump has all kinds of arguments for why he doesn't want people to see the film, but why do we remember that? Why is that more important than other more fair media?
Politics and the movies have a very uneasy relationship because movies are art, not information. And art works, whether it's high art or low art works by appealing to the universal, by appealing to what is complicated. The reason that Citizen Kane, which is a movie about William Randolph Hearst, who was a great publisher but also a politician, the reason it works is because it shows someone who's ultimately a villain in the movie, but it shows every aspect of his personality, including aspects of greatness, aspects of kindness, aspects of integrity. And it was his very greatness that makes what happens to him at the end so pitiable and so alarming. Because it showed a personality in full, it made a great work of art. But what most filmmakers who make a movie about politics want to do is to affirm their strong, passionate political commitments. So the challenge for films is always, do you want to make a point or do you want to make a movie? And a lot of modern filmmakers, they just want to make a point.
Well, I do hope that we get to see The Apprentice and get to decide whether it's art, high art or low art.
Thank you.
David, thank you so much.
Great to talk to you.